how nice to see you. It's a little early in New Zealand,
It
but
is.
it's never too early to drink wine. So here we are.
Oh, well, great. Well, so your morning, our evening, we are definitely enjoying your 2018.
We really are.
Two pallets Pinot Noir.
As I said, it's pretty much half of it's already gone, Sam. So I'm sorry about that. You'll have to forgive us. It's good.
I'll join you in a minute, but in the meantime, I've just got out of bed, so
you have your tea. Absolutely.
Excuse me if I just finished my cup of tea.
So Sam, you're in isolation because you've been in the UK for 5 months, you say, and you've been filming. What have you been filming in the UK?
Yeah, we were locked away in Buckinghamshire in a very nice hotel for 5 months. I didn't really see anyone other than the rest of the cast and the crew, and most of the crew I didn't see either. And I know some of them very well now, but I have no idea what they look like because everyone would talk to you like this. So I would mostly guess by what hat they had on or something like that. So
I love
it was a very strange experience, but it was a lot of fun. And
what have you been filming?
The sixth Jurassic film.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm pleased to say that in my advanced years, I can still run like the best of them when a dinosaur is intent on eating you for a snack. And, I thought it might be something of a challenge, but anyway, it turned out fine, and we actually really enjoyed ourselves. It was very strange to be in England and not being able to, I don't know, go and first of all visit friends. I've got many friends in London in particular, and get about and have a good weekend. I don't know, up in the Cotswolds or something like that. That all that was impossible. But we were at a place called Langley Park, and we had 170 acres of beautiful oak trees and Wellingtonias and so on around us. So it wasn't like being in Stalag 19. It was actually it was like being in a spa hotel, somewhere between a spa hotel and rehab.
I hope there was wine though.
There was lots of wine, and the studio was just down the road, so it was very close to Pinewood, and it was it was a lot of fun. But now the wine was mostly left for the weekend because there were long days and school days and early nights mostly.
So Sam, we obviously want to talk to you about wine. So you started back in 1993 in Central Otago. And of course, your family were in the wine and spirits business as well. But at that time, which this fascinates me, at that time, there were about a dozen producers. The vineyard was sort of a tenth of the size of what it is now. What on earth made you take that risk, buy land, plant vines, and make Pinot Noir? I mean, what did it for you?
Yes, it was an odd impulse, but on reflection, it was something I'd been at the back of my mind for a long time. And I sort of ran into some friends, some wine producing friends, in a car park. We were just I don't know, and Rob Hay, who was one of the originals at Chard Farm, said, "Look, we've bought some land. Do you want? We're thinking of buying some land. Do you want to come in with us? We'll all plant a vineyard each, and we think it's a really good site." So I went in with them, and I selected the block that I wanted, and that turned out to be my first paddock. I'd sort of been thinking about this, first of all, because there's generations of my family who have been in wines and spirits. I'm the first wine producer of the family, but there's probably 200 years of it in the family. I don't know, going back to wine merchants in Belfast. some very dear old family friends, the Mills at Ripon, were starting to produce this really interesting Pinot Noir. Now, I got fascinated with Burgundy when I came to England to film at Pinewood, actually, in 1979, 80.
What were you filming then, Sam?
Well, I was playing the Antichrist in one of the Omen films.
So the Antichrist needed some Pinot Noir. Do we read much into that?
That's right. He was a man of wealth and taste, as in the Mick Jagger song. But I was living off the Marylebone Road. On the way there, I'd had this. You know how many people talk about. Jancis Robinson, for instance, talks about the first time she drank a good Burgundy, and I think it was a Gevrey Chambertin, and she went out with a date with a boyfriend who wasn't to last, but she remembers that first glass of wine, that Gevrey, that first great glass of Burgundy, and that's sort of what it got her interested in Pinot Noir. And I'm sure both of you have something like that as well. But the glass for me was, on the way to do that film, I stayed with James Mason, great actor, and he and his wife sort of took me under their wing and found me an agent in London and so on. And we went out to dinner to a wonderful auberge on the shores of Lake Geneva, and it was Charlie Chaplin had not long died. It was Charlie Chaplin's favorite restaurant. They used to go and eat with him there. And we sat in what was sort of a booth, I suppose, in sort of medieval booth. The restaurant dated back to 1405 or something. And there was Charlie Chaplin's name carved in this ancient wood. And James said, "I think you should carve your name there under." And I said, "No, I can't possibly do that." But thanks for the thought. But he ordered this bottle of wine, and it was I don't know what it was, and I wish I knew who the producer made it, because I'd never heard of Burgundy. Well, I heard of Burgundy, but I didn't know what it was. And I said, "This is really remarkable, James. What is it?" And he said, "This is Burgundy, my boy, and don't forget it." And so I never forgot it. And then I was living off the Edgware Road in London for 2 or 3 years. I had some very nice wine merchants down the road, and I would go in there and I'd say, well, they started to know me, and they'd say, "You're looking for a nice Burgundy?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And so I started exploring Burgundy. I started with whites, and then I sort of then got interested in Pinot Noirs, and that's what really, and things like Gevrey. And I thought, I suppose I thought, I wonder if you could grow this in New Zealand, because it was very early days in it. I mean, they've been growing wine in New Zealand since 1830 or something, but it was very early days in terms of good wine coming from New Zealand. You know, people were growing stuff to make brandy and fortified wines, but there were some interesting wines beginning to come out of New Zealand in the 1980s, and it occurred to me, I wonder if you could grow this Pinot Noir stuff in New Zealand. So cut to 13 years later, and I'm talking to a friend in a car park, and 4 years after that, we had our first vintage from that little plot of mine, which was all of 5 acres. And to my complete astonishment, it was really good Pinot Noir. Not of the sort of standard we're producing now, but it really knocked my socks off. I was completely surprised. I wasn't really expecting something of that quality. So that's when I got kind of obsessed by it. And now I have 4 little vineyards, none of them much bigger than that. I think the biggest one is 12 acres. And they're all sort of distributed around the Central Otago region. And Central Otago, since that time, has become one of the I'm just sort of guessing now, but one of the sort of, apart from Burgundy, one of the half a dozen most famous little Pinot Noir areas in the world. And
absolutely,
so that was a sort of happy
and I think one of our favorite areas as well. Now, you've mentioned an obsession. You've also written that you said you didn't really have great ambitions to be a movie star, but when you started growing Pinot Noir, you realized you were an ambitious person because your ambition was to make the greatest Pinot ever. How's that quest going?
Well, the proof is in the pudding, and you're drinking the 2018.
Delicious.
And I did have a little tasting, and happily, I have a bottle myself here.
So you asked too.
Of the 2018, and I think we're really producing something that's pretty extraordinary now. What we do now is I have an entry-level Pinot called Picnic Pinot Noir, and that's sort of much more affordable, but still really good. If we produce any wine that we don't like, we'll sell it off, and people, I don't know, blend it into something. So we only produce stuff that we think is top notch. But our flagship is this, that's the Two Paddocks Pinot Noir. And the 18 was a very benign year. From memory, it was a warm spring. I think we flowered about a month earlier than usual. Quite a hot summer, and we were a little concerned that things were coming on actually too fast. Because the thing about Pinot Noir is it is a cool climate wine, and you don't want to be producing it in somewhere where you could make Shiraz or Cabernet or something like that. It has to be in a cool climate. And then happily, in February, things really cooled down. So and all the ripening process went into a very much slower phase. And as a result of all those wonderful sort of secondary flavors and so on that will develop in the grape, we're allowed to gradually come on. We still picked about 3 or 4 weeks earlier than we would expect to. But then when we usually pick, it's always touch and go as to whether we're going to make it at all.
Yeah.
And that's
there is. I mean, there's a delicacy about this. There's a concentration of flavors, but there's also that amazing delicacy and the fact it's 13% alcohol. You know, it's got a lift to it and a freshness on the finish that I think is quite extraordinary. If it was a hot vintage and you were, you know, everything was early. It's a really remarkable wine in that context.
And I think that
beautiful.
You know, obviously, we're used to some of the Bannockburn styles, particularly being from Central Otago, being really quite rich and voluptuous and quite heady and muscular and darker. Your Pinots have always struck me as being something very, very elegant, much lighter in tone, much more lifted. You know, no less complex, but maybe more drinkable. I know that, you know, one of your vineyards, I think the Last Chance, is one of the most southerly vineyards in Central Otago and therefore the world, isn't it? So you've got this sort of tension in your wines, and you see that in the single vineyard wines as well. I think in different styles, but you get that always in your wines. There's a tension, a sort of a lovely kind of grip, and a style that makes you kind of sit up.
Yeah.
Sam, this is an unusual year in that it's about quarter, you know, from all 4 vineyards. This blend, we always take from all 4 vineyards the best of what we like, and because it was so benign in every vineyard, it's very balanced between those 4. Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about those single vineyards, and here's the last chart. That is the most, well, I like to call it the most southerly vineyard in the world. But Jancis went to Chile and found one that was further south.
There are, but
Pete's going to say the same. Yeah,
it's still it's the most beautiful vineyard as well. I think it's your favourite vineyard. Is that right?
Yeah, it's so sort of yeah. There's something about it that's really magical. These strange rocks that look like Jurassic frogs or something behind it.
Very pretty.
Yeah, and it has the most beautiful sort of expansive views. It's nowhere quite like it.
Sam, I'm gonna change from this very serious wine chat to your amazing videos that we've been watching during lockdown.
You have been watching a lot.
I've been watching quite a lot of them.
I've been worried about her, Sam. But,
there's ukulele playing. There are bedtime stories. I particularly liked your beef bourguignon episode when obviously you cooked the most extraordinary beef bourguignon, and drank your 2 paddocks with it. But I mean, what would you say to people? I mean, they're so lovely.
Beef bourguignon. What happened with that?
You flambéed it. There wasn't much beef bourguignon involved, but there was a flambé. There was a lighter, and there was this bottle was involved as well. I think you described it as you were sort of passing out with pleasure of that particular wine. But what would you say to? I mean, there's such a lovely light-hearted touch to everything. What would you say to people around the world, wine lovers who are feeling a bit down about lockdown? I mean, clearly you found ways to lighten the mood.
Yes, it's been a very tough year, isn't it? I mean, on all sorts of levels. I was actually advocating from time to time drinking less during lockdown, but drinking better wine, and really looking at what you're drinking rather than, because it wasn't a time to be sociable. I think part of the joy of wines is its sociability, and it's hard to think of. I mean, you can drink wine all day if you want to, but it's much better with friends and family and around a table and with some great food and convivial conversation. But a lot of that, of course, was impossible, and will continue to be so during the winter. So I'll start doing my silly videos and things again. to cheer people up.
Please
and
do.
I've always said that making wine is our motto is in the cheering up business since 1993. So I actually thought it was a good time to be drinking wine, but mostly one would be solitary or with your partner, perhaps with some irritating children. But drink less of it. But really. Really concentrate on what wine is and what you like about it, and sort out the varieties you like and the source, and actually make a little study of it, and that's fun in itself.
Take a bit of time, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you could choose, Sam, your perfect lockdown wine. I think it can't be one of your own.
It's a very difficult question.
We know all of yours are perfect.
We're putting you on the spot. What would
but if it wasn't your own, what would it be?
Well, look, I'm very proud because they're so completely different from anything that I produce. Because we just produce Pinot Noir at various levels and Riesling at 2 different levels. So I'm very fond of really big Australian Shiraz, and I think they're really good value too. And if for instance, a bottle of Penfolds 389, one of the great experiences of your life, and Yalumba, the signature, I really think they produce some fantastic wines. So yeah, those Peter Lehman. There's quite a number of producers that I really admire out of Australia, but they could not be more different from our delicate.
So true.
Our delicate
So true.
Pinots. They're big and beefy, and
you want something big and beefy to hug.
yeah, and they pack a wallop, you know.
Talking about wallops.
What have you been drinking?
Oh,
well, Pinot Noir, quite clearly. No, I mean, what have we been drinking? Well, we love white Burgundy, definitely. Yeah. So we love great Chardonnay. Funnily enough, one of the ones that we've drunk lots of over the last few months is the Vas Felix Filius Chardonnay from Australia. So Australia. Just such a lovely wine that every time we open a bottle, you think, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Can't get enough of it. But we're kind of slightly Syrah nuts as well. So Northern Rhone Syrah. But funnily enough, one of our favorites is actually Dry River from Martin Brown.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yes. So to treat ourselves, we'd have Dry River Syrah.
Yeah. So you describe that as a cool climate.
Definitely. Right. It's got the pepper, you know, it's got some of a little bit more fruit probably than you'd get in the Northern Rhone, but it's got that gorgeous savory pepperiness and freshness.
We love sort of sharing it with friends, maybe sometimes who aren't wine geeks, because it's got a bit of generosity to it, but at the same time, it's got that lovely
I don't think we've ever served it to anybody who hasn't gone, what is this? It's fantastic.
Like us, they're very small producers. And care a lot about what they do. I'm becoming more and more obsessed by scarcity, and this I haven't even tried it yet, but this is a brand new thing. It's probably hard to read on it. Anyway, you know, in a good year we'll do a single vineyard from one of those 4 vineyards, and one of the last one we acquired, it's the only vineyard I didn't plant. It's called the Fusilier, and I acquired it about 5 or 6 years ago. It's in Bannockburn. It's right next to Felton Road, so it is that big Bannockburn wine that we produce off there, and it's become a sort of quite an important component of the Two Paddocks blend. But this is not only a single vineyard. The clone, the Pinot Noir clone that always shines there is from the top terrace. So it's a 3-terraced vineyard, and the top terrace has clone 777, rather good number. And I just thought it'd be interesting to just produce not just a single vineyard, but just one clonal wine from one small part of a very small vineyard. So this is bottle 884 out of 924 bottles. So
and you haven't tried it yet?
No, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that tonight. So,
did you number all those by hand, Sam? Was that your writing on there?
Actually, talking of Jancis, she said, "I hope you don't put your
signature
name on the front." And then I got talked into it.
Oh.
Because I said, what's the really famous, what's the most famous Burgundy estate?
Romani Conti.
Yeah, but the producer.
Aubert de Villaine?
Yeah, and he signs his bottles. I thought, well, if it's good enough for him,
it's good enough.
It's good enough for me.
I'm very concerned we're about to run out of time because we're on a limit on Zoom, aren't we?
It's just flashed up. But I do want to ask before. Yeah. We have to ask about the animals, Sam. I know you're quizzed about them very often, but you know, when I was there, I loved meeting. I think it was Imogen Poots I met.
Yes.
But do you want to just tell us about your wonderful? Because you are farmers. You describe yourself as a farmer. You don't just make wine. You make lots of different things, fruits, and you've got a wonderful selection of animals, and you're organic. Just talk us through your your wonderful animals. You're obviously very fond of them. You name them.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Well, it's also part, you know, that I think what we do is it's holistic. In other words, the animals are very much part of how we make wine, and the sheep graze between the rows. The chickens go around and, you know, peck around and get rid of grass grubs and things. It's all part of the process, and but I just like animals. The only thing about being away in England all that time was my favorite duck, Charlie, who's been a great companion for about 10 years, and would just hang around with me and talk to me all day. Died in the winter, and no. So I'm going to miss Charlie awfully. But my pigs are still there. I have about 50 sheep at any one time. We had a good lambing season. There's always so much to do around the farm, around the vineyards. And so I'm really looking forward to actually getting back to my other life, because, you know, my day job is acting, but my life is wine and farming, and I'm in isolation and quarantine, like so much of the world at the moment. But I will be out, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm very grateful to the government here in New Zealand who stamped down on COVID so fast. And even here, you know, I think there is something like 3 cases of COVID in the entire country. And today they made it mandatory for everyone on public transport and on planes and so on, or gathering, to wear a mask. I mean, it's not a big ask. No. And I was surprised when I went through London last week on the way home, how few people were wearing masks, and London is spiking. I mean, the UK is spiking. So, yeah. I mean, it seems to me just common sense. And so I do wish everybody well over the winter. And I do implore people to wear masks and limit their social interactions. And I think next year will be different. There will definitely be vaccines. And please don't listen to the anti-vaxxers, because these things will save the world and save our economies. And I'm optimistic about next year, but I wish everyone well over the winter. Happy drinking. It's very nice to see you both.
Lovely to see you too. Sam Neill, thank you so much for joining us at Wine Festival Online. You are an absolute superstar. Here's raising a very large glass to your good health.
Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, and thank you. Thank you.
Please forgive me if I raised my cup of tea, but it is 8:30 in the morning.
We know you've got wine in that glass, Sam.
Mug of Pinot. Cheers.
Cheers, Sam.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.